Maybe first for the people who don't know me yet, I'm going to present myself a little bit. So I'm Lawrence. I'm currently working at the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where I'm managing the social media, and I'm also involved in the strategic communication part, so dealing with disinformation and countering that disinformation. My background is multilingual communication and international relations, so in fact I'm now combining both of my studies at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I'm also a big fan of Ukraine since now almost 2 years, almost. So I think in the last 1.5 years I went 7 times to Ukraine. First for my studies, but afterwards I also volunteered for the NGO Go Global, which organizes English teaching camps for Ukrainian school children. So I organized activities for Ukrainian school children in Kharkiv and Hadiach. And since then I was staying there with the host family, so I often go back to Ukraine to visit my host family. And now I also have some friends in Ukraine, so in fact tomorrow I will also go to Kiev for our next visit. What I want to do today is to present how you can brand a country. In this specific case, I think I will focus on Ukraine through social media. First of all, I have to say, in fact, that the impact of social media is often overestimated. What people see on social media doesn't always impact their life as much as people often perceive, especially now with all the news around disinformation, Russian advertising on Facebook and so on. I would argue that the impact is quite limited. Although social media are very important in branding a country. Why? Because it's always about the perception of people of a certain country, and social media gives you the advantage to spread your message to a wide audience without someone interfering in your message. Before, it has always been the press which nuanced which spread your message. Now you can actually on social media spread your own message without any nuance by a third person. So first of all, I'm going to give a little bit of context why I give this presentation and in which atmosphere we are currently living. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the post-truth century. Then I will explain why country branding is so important, what it is exactly, and describe a little bit the social media landscape. And then during the main part I will mainly focus on storytelling and how you can escape your echo chamber, but I will explain a little bit more about that later. So today I'm not going to explain you how to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram or other social media in details, but I really want to focus on the strategic part and how you can use social media to spread your message in a coherent way. Because I think it's often underestimated how to use social media. Everybody is on social media, everybody uses social media every day, but few people actually use it strategically and know how to use social media. It is a topic about which everyone has an opinion, but few people are actually know how to use these social media to spread your message. recently the adjective post-truth has been named the word or the adjective of the year, and what it exactly means is that people don't base their public opinion, or the public opinion is not based anymore on actual facts, but more on emotions. So we're living currently in a communication atmosphere where people don't trust the mainstream media anymore, or politicians, these mainstream media, but they attach more value to what a person says, to the emotions of a person, and the information that he gives through his own emotions and personal beliefs. For example, you see that Donald Trump on Twitter has much more impact than his personal account, which is Real Donald Trump, @RealDonaldTrump, has more impact than the account of the president, which is @POTUS, because people tend to identify themselves with a person and less with an institution. And this is a big change, that now people can present themselves on social media and spread their message without having to use the communication department of the institution for which they are working. So you now also see that politicians are much more influential than in the past. That's also why President Poroshenko, Prime Minister Groysman, they all use their social media accounts to spread the message about Ukraine. People follow less the Ministry of Interior or the presidential office on social media, because for people it's very difficult to identify themselves with this vague institution of which they don't know who is behind the social media accounts. I have to say that most of the politicians also have this communication team behind them spreading the message on social media, but often people don't know that there is a whole machine of people behind the social media account. I know, for example, in Ukraine, that they also hired some foreign, especially from the Foreign Office in Great Britain, some people who deal with strategic communication, and they give advice, and they even manage the social media accounts of some ministers or ministries. So this is a little bit the context in which we have to deal, and because it's so difficult, because it's so easy for people to convince other people with emotions, that's also why now a lot of populist parties make this emotional appeal to people. They have found in these social media the medium to spread this emotional message, which was not possible before, because before it was very informal, formal communication, which was spread by the press. So they sent press releases to the press, and then they had to hope that the press would publish an article the next day. Today that is different. If Donald Trump tweets, it is immediately seen by millions of people. So that is the main difference between communication today and communication in the past. The post-truth century doesn't mean that facts aren't important anymore. It's just important how you bring the facts. So that's also what I'm going to focus on in today, is how to bring facts, how to promote your country, but with emotions, with these emotional appeals. Just one example: if you type in Google search Ukraine is, then you get this list of what Ukraine is, and this is in fact quite important because it's based on algorithms. So Facebook decides what people search for most or what is most on the internet, and and they show it in the search results. So the first thing is Ukraine is not a brothel, but this is a movie or documentary about the Femen movement, and apparently it's like you see, it's widespread on the internet. But if you see it as the first Google search, it's quite strange if you don't know the background about the documentary. Second thing is Ukraine is not a country. So this is a clear example that there are a lot of right-wing Russian-inspired websites on the internet which try to show that Ukraine is not a country. What it is, it's also not clear from the Google search. But if people see this, they start to doubt about what is Ukraine exactly. Although you see also the fourth result is Ukraine is EU, which also means that Ukraine and EU are somehow always related in the Google search and in the algorithms of Google. But then if you look further, Ukraine is weak, Ukraine is a failed state. So this is a clear evidence that there is a lot of disinformation or lack of information about Ukraine in general, and that populist movements can use this to make Ukraine even weaker. Has become country branding so important is because our world is today more globalized. People have much more access to information. People are much more aware of what is happening in the world, but often they don't have the means to travel to another country or to visit all the countries in the world. So their beliefs, their information is in fact based on what they found on the internet, what they hear from other people. This is just one example. If you type in Google search Ukraine is, then you get this list of what Ukraine is. And this is in fact quite important because it's based on algorithms. So Facebook decides what people search for most or what is most on the internet, and and they show it in the search results. So the first thing is Ukraine is not a brothel, but this is a movie or documentary about the Femen movement, and apparently it's like you see, it's widespread on the internet. But if you see it as the first Google search, it's quite strange if you don't know the background about the documentary. Second thing is Ukraine is not a country. So this is a clear example that there are a lot of right-wing Russian-inspired websites on the internet which try to show that Ukraine is not a country. What it is, it's also not clear from the Google search. But if people see this, they start to doubt about what is Ukraine exactly. Although you see also the fourth result is Ukraine is EU, which also means that Ukraine and EU are somehow always related in the Google search and in the algorithms of Google. But then if you look further, Ukraine is weak, Ukraine is a failed state. So this is a clear evidence that there is a lot of disinformation or lack of information about Ukraine in general, and that populist movements can use this to make Ukraine even weaker. Social media have the disadvantage that you have the impression that you reach a lot of people, but in fact you always stay in your own community of people, of like-minded people. You only have your friends on Facebook, on Twitter. You mainly follow people about whom you are interested, and so on. And that is not easy to escape, but I'm going to explain you a little bit how you could do it. It's something also I'm currently experimenting with, and there is no clear solution to escape your echo chamber, but I'm going to hopefully give you some inspiration. An important part of what I'm doing every day is storytelling. Storytelling has become less important in communications. People have forgotten to tell stories because you have now so much information. Everybody is their own messenger. It has become difficult to really to tell a story to people, and the basic of communication are still these stories. What people did in the past, in the prehistory, was telling stories to each other. Before there was internet, before there was even documented stories, people orally told stories to each other, and this shaped their view of the world. People base what they believe on what they hear from other people, on the stories people tell to them. And a lot of, not only politicians, ministries, but also businesses have forgotten this, that it is about these stories, and it is not about just sending your information in the world and hoping that someone will receive your message. And this has also to do with the fact that communication is all about psychology. How we perceive the world, how we receive information, this is always based on psychology and the mechanisms of our mind. So it's also about repeating a certain message. People only start to believe a story if it's told by many people, if it's often repeated, and this is in fact the basis of what I'm trying to do, and what I think is the best way to brand the country, is to tell these stories about the country. Ukraine is a big country, has a lot to offer, but often people don't know how to tell what Ukraine has to offer, and the other way around, people just don't know that Ukraine has to offer so much. So on the two sides there is a problem, and you are the first people who can tell those stories to the people that you want to reach. People who know about what Ukraine has to offer, people who know what Ukraine is built of. So my main advice is in country branding through social media is to tell these stories. It's not about just once writing something about Borscht, or the next day write something about Ukrainian art, how good or how Ukrainian art is developing. No, you have to repeat this story, and you have to build a story around it. So that's why I compare these stories with kind of soap opera. Soap operas have one main message. It's mainly about family life, and then you have all kinds of different stories interfering in these family lives. If I take the example of Ukraine, I would say, but this is just an example, the story about Ukraine is a young, dynamic, vibrant, forward-looking country. So this is the basis line of your story. But then to tell to explain to people, to prove to people that Ukraine is modern, is young, is forward-looking, you have to develop these side stories which actually prove that this is true. There is a Twitter account at Ukraine which is actually doing this in a quite good way. They use a certain hashtag to promote Ukrainian music, Ukrainian cuisine, and every tweet they send, they put a hashtag at the end which explains something about Ukrainian cuisine. And I find this actually quite good, because the hashtag is so specific that if you search for the hashtag, you only see things related to Ukrainian cuisine, Ukrainian art, Ukrainian music. So I think that Twitter account at Ukraine has set an example which could also be used by other Ukrainian other NGOs or organizations which promote Ukraine, is to use the same hashtags and to tell the stories which are not being told by the main account Ukraine yet. At the same time, it could develop new hashtags to show certain aspects of the country and to build a story around that. Those hashtags work best on Twitter, but you could also use hashtags on Facebook, on Instagram, and LinkedIn as well. You could use the same hashtags and develop these stories. What is also important about those stories is that they need to be identifiable, which means that people need to be able to identify themselves with the stories. The stories need to be personal. People are less attracted to the story if it's something vague, which is just a message. Let's say, for example, the export of Ukrainian wine to Europe is 10%, or something just a boring fact about Ukrainian wine, which could prove that Ukrainian wine is of good quality, but people cannot identify themselves with the stories because this is vague. What does it mean, 10% of the EU exports? So you always, if you want to tell a story, you need to bring people into the story. It's Marta who tells that Ukrainian wine is excellent. It's Laura who tells that borscht is the best soup in the world. So you really need to bring people in the stories and make kind of testimonials of what you want to tell. So it's quite vague what I'm now going to say, but you need to find a creative way of saying what you want to say. To give an example, on Instagram it's very popular to publish a photo of your cat, and I'm sure if you post a photo of your cat you will get hundreds of likes. You could, for example, dress a cat in a Ukrainian flag and you will get massive likes. But I don't know if that isn't not the goal of what we want to achieve. You could use the same photo of the cat in a Ukrainian flag, but you need to give a certain message. So what is often lacking is this creative mind when it comes to politics and diplomacy. So you could say you take a picture with a cat dressed in the Ukrainian flag, and on the background you have the funicular in Kiev, and then you could explain something about the funicular or about the transport in Kiev, but people are first attracted to the photo, and if they see above the photo a text, or underneath the photo a text which explains them something, which is a nice fact about Ukraine. For example, you could write, did you know that the transport system in Kiev is one of the best transport systems in the world, to give just an example. And it's these kind of stories which people like and which people tend to believe and which remains in their mind, because this is important in communication, that the message always remains in their mind if they see something related to what they have seen before. That's why you need to repeat your message often. It's not as effective if you just do this once with the cat, but then afterwards you need to repeat the same message but in an other way. For example, you take a selfie in the funicular and then you explain something, another fact about the funicular. So people need to be able to identify themselves with these stories, and they need to be easy to digest. They cannot be too difficult. If you start explaining all the mechanics of the funicular, what the mechanisms behind the funicular are, people are not interested and are often not able to understand what you want to say, because it's very specific. You might know how it works, but to explain to other people, it's not that easy in a short text. So always you need to make sure that your stories are short and sharp. Also a strong believer of what I call empathic communication. What often businesses, politicians, ministries have wrong when they use social media is that they just spread the message that they want to spread. It's easy to tell your audience what you want to tell, but what they don't realize is that the audience is not always interested in what you have to tell. So that's why, again, you need to make the relation with psychology. You need to understand what people like, how people use social media, and play with that. Like I said, when people go on social media, they are not looking for difficult information which keeps them there for more than 5 minutes. They just scroll on to the next subject when they get bored or when it's too long. And it's not that difficult to listen what your audience wants, because you see what the popular trends on social media are. It's mainly about food, music, animals. So you have these typical subjects which people like, and you just have to look at yourself and think about what do I search on social media? What do I like? What do I find interesting? And it's in fact knowing what the preferences of your audience are. And this is in fact what now has been done with the interference of Russia, other countries in the elections in the US, in Great Britain and so on. They analyzed the psychosocial preferences of people. They knew that I, for example, like cycling. So what they did is then build a certain advertisement around cycling, but with a political message. They financed this message and they spread it. You can now use advertisements on Twitter, Facebook, where you really target a specific audience. So you can say, I want to target all the people who like cycling, because what you do every day on Facebook, Facebook knows what you do every day on Facebook. So if I like 10 pages about cycling, they will start to know that I like cycling. So they know, in fact, everything about you, your preferences on Facebook. you can ask, for example, a whole document where they show what are your preferences, which companies are most related to you, and so on. And they sell this data to companies, which companies use to make this personal advertisement, which is on the one hand good, but on the other side you see now how it could even threaten our democracy, because they with these targeted messages they mobilize more people than before. So that's when I said in the beginning that the impact of social media is overestimated, is in fact that it's difficult to actually change the beliefs of people through social media, but you can let people believe more in what they believed before. So also the interference in the US elections, Brexit, what they did is not changing the beliefs of people, but saying to them, you have to vote because this is what we stand for, and if you choose our point of view, you will get what you want. It's really about this mobilization. You see that the turnout just went higher, but not it's not necessarily about how people changed their minds. In Germany you saw, for example, that the party AfD, which is the most right-wing party in Germany, really targeted their advertisements to the Russian-speaking part of Eastern Germany, of Germany. So it's people, normally the Russian-speaking community in Germany didn't went to vote. This time they did, because of these advertisements, which mobilized them, which attracted them to go and vote for the AfD. So with less financial means, you cannot do this psychosocial analysis, and if you don't have a budget, you cannot sponsorize your messages. But what you can do is to play with the preferences of most people. Most of us share more or less the same interests, what concerns culture, sports, food, and this is what you need to tell. Ukraine has a lot to offer in terms of cuisine, but also in terms of nature, landscapes. I mean, it's something which people like, but which people don't know yet that Ukraine has to offer, what it has. Few people know what the Carpathian Mountains are, that you can go skiing there in the winter, or that you can go hiking in summer, or that there are beaches in Ukraine. Simple things like that, which you can show with just beautiful photos. And every time, it's not just about publishing this photo of the nice Carpathian Mountains, but tell to people, when you go to the Carpathian Mountains, it's an ideal place for hiking, for skiing, whatsoever. So always combine the beautiful photo or the creative photo with your message. Moving on then to this echo chamber, which I talked already a little bit about it, and which is also related to this overestimated impact of social media, is that you always reach your friends when you publish something on Facebook. You always reach people who are already more or less interested in Ukraine in this specific case. So people who like the Facebook page, Twitter account of Promote Ukraine are mainly people who are already interested in Ukraine. And for me, in my current job, it's a little bit the same. I reach people who are already more or less convinced that Belgium is a nice country, and people who are interested in international relations. but how to reach the people in the street who don't know anything about Belgian foreign affairs, who are not necessarily interested, and yeah, how to inform them about what we do. And like I said before, I also don't have a clear solution. I'm not going to say you have to do like this and then you will be able to escape your echo chamber. It's something with which I'm experimenting now. And what I see and what you need to understand about social media is that it's just an extra means of communication. Social media don't replace other normal face-to-face communication, because at the end of the day, still this face-to-face communication is the most important communication.